Okay, so welcome everybody to what was the November e-learning webinar, but has become the 1st of December one. This will be the last one of the year, but I think they've been very successful generally. I'm delighted to introduce Neil Lasher, who is going to talk about mentoring today to everybody. And Neil has been a member of the e-learning network for some time and has been a mentor, is a mentor. And we're also joined by Sam Yates, who is one of the eLN current directors and is in charge of the mentoring scheme. So Neil, without further ado, I will hand over to you.
Thank you. Well, good morning all. Or good afternoon all, because it's gone 12 o'clock now. It's going to throw me out. I'm actually a past vice president of the eLN, going back many years. I think for sometime around, I think it was either the 10th or the 15th anniversary. So to give you an idea, Phil Green was the chair at the time, so I was vice chair or whatever we happened to call ourselves. It was more of a case of hide as much as possible so that people didn't find us. I think we were at the Chemical Society we used to meet at once a month, which was good fun. So welcome, and I see people are joining. I can see a couple of people in the list who I definitely know because they've I've been their mentor, which is interesting. Today, if I really want to try and create some conversation if we can. It would be nice. If we can, please either throw a question in the Q&A or something in the chat, and hopefully we'll get you elevated to panelists so that we can hear you speak. That'll be, I think, the way to make it work. With me today, who's also going to speak a little bit at some point in time, is Sam Yates, who runs the mentoring scheme. It's a great picture, that one, Sam. I was going to take the one off of. I was going to take the one off your Twitter account, which looks like you've got a pair of Google glasses on. But I'm not sure whether you'd have been happy with that one on there today. And in fact, this is the slide you sent me, so I swapped it over very quickly. But I had a very similar one in the same picture, so you'll be happy. So today, what I'm going to try and do today, and of course, as I've started, there's somebody using an angle grinder outside somewhere, so the brain is going to try and not listen to that as much as possible. Today, what we're going to try and do is look at the whole mentoring concept. Now, I know there's a number of people here that maybe don't want to be a part of the eLN mentoring scheme, but that's all right. I mean, you'll have to just take the bits out of this that suit your own personal environment. But going to go through really what is a mentor and what is a mentee, and what part do you play. So I'm going to look at it from both sides. How does the whole process work? So what can you expect? I'm going to look a little bit about how to be a better mentor or mentee. Talk a bit about when to talk and when to listen. Not quite the normal rules. And should you challenge or should you lead? Preparing your first meeting, so how to plan a meeting, how to actually approach the whole concept of being a mentor, how to approach the whole concept of being a mentee. And then, of course, what's very important, apart from the meetings that you have in the middle all the way through, what to do about a final meeting, because a final meeting is really very important, and how to deal with closure. And then one bit that we really do need to speak about at any point in time, and that's obviously about if there is challenge or there's conflict or there's a problem. And I want to just talk, not going to speak very long on that, but I think we do need to cover it and have that into the mix. So my first question really is formal or informal? And there are a number of ways of mentoring. I've been involved in a number of different ways, both formal and informal. And I have to be very honest with you that formal tends to bridge the gap towards coaching rather than mentoring often. And I'm always worried when there's a formal process. So if you want to set up a mentoring system or environment within an organization, you've still got to try, in my opinion, to try and keep this at an informal level, and I'll cover both of those as we move forwards. It's very easy to, and if you have a look at the sort of left-hand side of this, is if you test yourself as you're going through, it's very easy to get to the point where the mentee can become angry. So if you're a mentee, you're actually not quite liking this anymore. challenged too hard, maybe. So there's a balance that you have to get, and the balance really goes between teaching and learning and really exploring yourself and growing. But it has to suit everybody. So one thing to remember from the very, very beginning of this is how do you set a level where everybody gets something out of this, both the mentee and the mentor. So being a mentor, yeah, I've learned loads. Somebody will say something and I'll say, oh, tell me more about that. I have not heard of that before. And you get a bit of a two-way channel going. There's also a lot of growing and learning to do to be a mentor, as well as the growing and learning to be a mentee. So if we try and look at both. So first of all, let's have a look at it from an eLN perspective. And you can swap bits out. You can take the word eLN out of this quite happily. To be a mentor, you need to be somebody who is would be good if you're in the same profession as the person that you're mentoring. But I think really what you need is not so much knowing trends and changes. Mentorship is a relationship which is experienced or a more knowledgeable person helping to guide a less experienced or less knowledgeable person. It's probably the easiest way of putting it. Mentor may be older or younger than the person being mentored, but he or she has got to have a certain area of expertise. It's a learning and development partnership between someone with, I would say, vast experience and someone who wants to learn. So that's the way of looking at it a little bit from both sides. The process is, for me, an informal transmission of knowledge, social capital, psychological support, as perceived by the recipient, and relevant to their work, career, or professional development. Entails informal communication, usually face-to-face, although a lot of it's done on the phone as well. And in fact, the majority of or all of the eLN mentoring is done almost exclusively over Skype, although you do have a face-to-face because you've got cameras running, of course. And it's between a person who's perceived to have that greater relevant knowledge, wisdom, experience, and a person who is perceived to have less. And you can work out for yourself which one was the mentor and which one was the mentee, I'm sure. So that's sort of laying the ground as to who the players are. However, there are definite overlaps. So, a mentee brings a lot to the table. At the same time, a mentor brings a lot to the table. So actually, you can both learn from it. And it's very fulfilling. How does it differ from, yes?
Sorry, Neil, it's John here. We've had a question already, which is,
good.
What's the difference between coaching and mentoring? So can I just...
There you go, my next slide.
Now, perfect.
We call that frogging. A frog jumps ahead. So there you go. So whoever it was, thank you for the message. Here we go. What's the difference? I've actually laid it out on both sides because I knew somebody was going to say, what's the difference between coaching and mentoring? If you have a look at mentoring, it's often an ongoing relationship that can last a long period of time. Now, we do set the amount at the eLN, we set the number of sessions. However, to be very honest with you, between the two and the relationship, if you wanted to add another couple of sessions in, you can absolutely do so. There's no reason why you shouldn't, providing you've both agreed that and know where you sit. Whereas coaching normally has a set duration, often has a set duration. I won't say normally, often has a set duration. Coaching is generally very structured. And people meet on a regular basis and there's a structure to where you're aiming to get to. Whereas in mentoring, it's a little bit more free flow. You do have an objective of where to get to and we'll cover that and maybe what you want to try and cover. But a lot of things will come up and you can absolutely take lots of tangents. For me, the biggest difference is the one that I've highlighted here. And that is that the agenda is set by the mentee. The mentor provides support and guidance, prepares them for their future roles or whatever they're doing, but the mentee sets the pace and the agenda, where often in coaching, the agenda is focused on achieving a specific, something that's written down, got to get to, must get to the end. And for me, that is the absolute difference between the two at this level. The Coaching often, and the last one here is that coaching often revolves around a more specific development area or something that, say, a company wants somebody to be coached in doing, whereas mentoring revolves around more of developing the mentee's professional career and may change as you're moving forwards. So you'll start off with one objective, but you might actually end up having to rethink that halfway, which you'll see. So the normal view, when you would come to a webinar like this, you would see a webinar that says how to be a mentor. And solely we would look at it from being a mentor. You could probably find some recordings out there that say, what's it like to be mentored? What's it like to be a mentee? And you'll see a direct view. But what I'm going to try and do in the next, looking for a clock, because of course, what I do left my left my watch downstairs as well. I can see one. In the next sort of 40 minutes or so, is to look at it side by side. So each slide I'm going to show you as we move forwards, going to show you both from the mentor and from the mentee's perspective, and try and look at it from both sides at the same time. So who's it for? Can you play? The mentor has knowledge, experience, and I've got to add in here that is willing to share. So if you're going to actually want to be a mentor, you've got to be willing to share. Now, I'm actually mentoring a number of people at the same time, not just for the eLN. I'm actually mentoring at a university technology college as well. You've got to be willing to give some stuff away here. I've learned gallons over the, I was about to say almost 30 years of being in this industry. And what I've learned, often something comes up and I think, oh my gosh, well, I did know that, but let me go look it up and I'll find out, and I'll give something away. When you're often mentoring, you're mentoring somebody who's in maybe another organization, and you've got to be really got to cut yourself away from the fact that that organization or that person could actually be eventually a competitor to myself. So if you're a consultant in the industry and you're mentoring someone who wants to be a consultant in the industry, I think you've got to be really open to free flow and give some stuff away here. For me, it really is giving something back to the industry. I've got a lot from it over the last 30 years, so I want to give something back. To be a mentor, you've got to have some specialization that others can learn from. And everybody has a different type of specialization. And when a mentee comes along and fills a form out for the eLN and says, I want to be a mentee, there is obviously a matching process that goes on that I'm going to let Sam tell you about very shortly. And that matching process finds the right mentor for the right mentee. And there's an opening meeting, which we'll talk about, that really is important to sort of find out, do you have a fit? You've got to be impartial. You've got to be entirely ethical and entirely confidential. You will hear things, and to be very honest with you, that's where they stop. And you've got to be very, very clear and draw a really wide line in the earth that says, I've heard that, and I'm going to put that in a box, I'm going to put a lid on it. Really very important. What you do have to be is you have to be proactive. You have to be proactive and you have to challenge. And I know a lot of people who have been mentored by me come away and think, whew, that was hard work. Well, yeah, great. Then if it wasn't hard work, then we didn't have a great day. Now, from the mentee's perspective, you've got to be open and eager to learn something new. I may tell you something and you may want to disagree with me, and we'll have a really good discussion about it, but you've got to be willing to go away and give it a try. You've got to be willing to be challenged. You've got to have some time that you're willing to give to explore the advice you receive. So when you do actually hear something and you want to go away and use it, you've got to find some time to go away and actually look at it and think about it, do a bit of research in it, and then actually do it. You've got to be prepared to conduct some tasks between meetings. And I know we've got one of the people that's on this call who's one of my mentees, who I know is actually right this moment in time, because I got an email from them today, is right at this moment in time actually doing what they were challenged to do. I'm really sort of sitting, waiting to see the results. It's going to be fun to see the results. I've seen some of the results already. And you've also got to be open to be proactive and flexible. So you've got to be willing to sort of say, I want the following. be bold, and flexible, because it might not actually fit in right this moment with what else is going on in your in the mentoring process. So you might have to bend and wait a bit and put something into a queue. I'm not going to go into Maya Angelou's, but you can read that for yourself on screen. It's really important about how you make people feel. So, and this is how you make people feel is the relationship between the two. So, how does the eLN process work? And what I'd like to do at this point, if I can, I'd like to call Sam in. Sam, would you like to sort of talk through this slide about how the process works and how you match people together?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Neil. Well, hi, everybody. I think looking through the list on there, again, as Neil's pointed out, some of them are already signed up as mentors, which is great, and mentees as well. So for those of you who haven't come across it before, the eLN does run a mentoring scheme for their members, so it is a member-only benefit. And the way that we position it is it's not formal business coaching, this is actual mentoring, and this is kind of positioned as a friend in the industry for you. So we know that things change very quickly in the industry. We know that there's a lot of information out there, and for people who are new to the industry coming in or changing roles within it, that could be quite daunting. So we've positioned it to try and help people through that and to give them a bit of guidance and sort of point them in the right direction, really, and give you a sounding board for your ideas and help you with some goals. As Neil's mentioned, we make sure that this is completely confidential between the two of you. We do advocate the use of NDAs as well, and although we don't have a particular one that you can use, we can definitely point you in the right direction of that to make sure that that gives you that confidence that what is talked about in those sessions stays within those sessions. Now, a little bit about our mentors themselves. All of them are volunteers from the industry, and they are selected from the networks of all the directors on the eLN board. So the reason that we have a sort of limit on the number of sessions that we provide within the scheme is just to help balance the workloads for those volunteers. They all have their own jobs, they all have work going on as well. So to entice the right people in, we just need to put some limits around that to make sure that it is actually realistic. So we set it up to say that you have around 5 hours in total over the space of a year. But how you use those 5 hours is completely up to you. So it could be that you have 5 one-hour sessions spread over the year, or you could break that down to shorter, more frequent sessions. And we let the two of you decide amongst yourselves how you're going to get that to work. So at the very beginning, if you want to become a mentee, is you can apply through the website, and I will have an initial conversation with you just to find out what it is that you want to do. What it is that you're wanting to get from the actual the relationship, what your goals are, what your location is, and all of that kind of stuff. And then I'll go away and talk to our network and find an appropriate mentor for you. At that point, I will set up an initial conversation with the three of us so that you can get to meet your mentor for the first time and just sort of talk through who you are, what you're trying to get from it as well, and introduce the two of you to each other. And then I'll step back and let the two of you take on that relationship in whatever form works for you. So it could be like Neil was saying, it could be over Skype, it could be if you're on a similar location that you can meet up. And I will check in from time to time, but at that point, the relationship is between the two of you. So we will step away and let you arrive at yourselves, and we do put the onus on the mentee to actually drive that relationship and make it work, and make sure that you're getting what you need from it. And obviously we'll check in from time to time just to make sure that it's all ticking along nicely. And I think Neil's going to cover this at the end today as well. It's really important. I'm really glad he's included it. But at the end of those 5 sessions or 5 hours, making sure that you have that closure at the end of the relationship is really important as well, to make sure that you've both got what you wanted from it. We do say at the eLN that if you want to continue that relationship after those 5 hours, that's completely up to you. And, you know, that's a lovely thing. We're very pleased when it does happen. But that would be outside of the eLN scheme because we have to put some parameters around it. So that's sort of the eLN mentoring scheme in a nutshell. Obviously, if you've got any questions, do please put them in the chat or contact me afterwards. Neil, is that enough, or would you like a little bit?
Yeah, no, absolutely fine. That's exactly what I wanted from you.
Brilliant.
Okay, so moving on, and the expectation. This is the biggest this is the biggest failure for any mentoring scheme that I've ever seen set up that didn't make it. And that was because people had the wrong expectations. Either they were too rigid in the formality of it, and really it was coaching rather than mentoring. Rigid in the formality that said, we want you to be able to achieve the following, and there's a line drawn in the sand that we've got to get to. And that's very formal. There's a rigid process we're going to go through. It actually borders really on teaching rather than mentoring. So for me, the expectations, the great expectations, the mentor has to be aware that the goalposts will move. Where you start today, and I'll talk about how I start that off. And there's a couple of people who are in the a couple of attendees here with you today who I hope may put some stuff when I start talking into the chat window, so you can all see, to confirm some of the things that I'm saying. But you start off with an idea of where you're going, and I'm going to talk about the first meeting as we move forwards today. But where you start, I guarantee you the goalposts will move. You'll end up into something completely different. The conversation, say a conversation about instructional design may end up as a conversation about how to get a new job. And here you were talking about instructional design models in the second meeting, and in the third meeting you're talking about how to have an interview for a job that you've just managed to get, for it to be an instructional designer somewhere else. And fine, if that's where the goalposts move to, that's where you allow them to move to. You may have to deal as a mentor with frustration or sadness when things don't go well with the mentee, and that's something that you're going to have to learn to deal with. I call it dancing in the moment. It's something that you will just have to deal with as it happens. The view from where I sit is it's being positive, positive, positive all the time. Really important. And you will have to act as a helpful friend sometimes when one is needed in the process as it takes place. And hopefully the mentee will be big enough and enthused enough to be able to pick themselves up and get on with whatever. So as you heard, you should expect 5 meetings over, I say, a period of time. It doesn't necessarily have to be a year. So, it doesn't have to be once every 2 months or once every 2 and a bit months. You might decide that you want to actually do one every 3 weeks for the next, over the next 15 weeks and finished. It may be something that's important now that needs that pace. And if so, fine, you make a decision between mentor and mentee. The mentee, you have to come to this, and if you're dealing with a mentee, you have to know they have to come to this with a decision about what they want to achieve. So, they have to be proactive. They have to be bringing it to the table. The mentee is going to have to be very honest at times. And if they do, they'll have that great experience. And if they're very honest, they've got to be comfortable that what they're going to say to you isn't going any further from the mentor perspective. I say it again, you should expect to have some challenge between meetings. I have always mentored in a place that says, we start our meeting looking at where I left you last time and what I asked you to do between meetings, and I leave you at the end, after whatever we've discussed throughout the session, with a number of challenges based upon what we've talked about that says, I need you to go away and do this by next time. Now, you often can't pre-plan those. You're going to have to plan those often on the fly as you're hearing what you're hearing during that session. And that's not always very easy. So that's another bit of the dancing in the moment, to come up with a challenge to give them. But you should leave them with a challenge to be able to push forwards so they actually can try something out that you've been talking about. Quite important. There's always this place, am I good enough to be a mentor? Am I good enough to be a mentee? How am I going to cope with what I hear when I'm not sure? I love the Dalai Lama when he says, when you talk, you're only repeating what you already know. When you listen, you may learn something new. That works from both sides in being a mentor-mentee. But talk or listen. The old 80-20 rule goes completely out the window. In a coaching perspective, often it's the coach speaks 20% of the time and the coachee speaks 80% of the time. In mentoring, I try to say there should be a 50-50 dialogue. I'm going to lead as a mentor. I'm going to lead the conversation. However, the mentee may not realize I'm leading the conversation. And if the mentee wants to lead the conversation, that's good too. One of the things that I actually have worked as I worked with a group of mentors to actually see how they worked. So I sat in on a number of meetings. This was at a university technology college. And I was surprised at how many of the mentors were talking what I call academics. Academic answers are sort of the book says you do A, B, C, and we all know that's not really the reality, and that's probably not what the mentee needs. The mentee really is trying to find out, give me a specific I can use now. What can I actually go away and do with it? Often I've been through bits of training, especially compliance training, where somebody is literally bamboozling me with academic rubbish. There was a pamphlet created and they've basically delivered the course by delivering the pamphlet in a course. I know no more now than by reading the pamphlet, and I can't do anything with it apart from knowing how it works. Well, that's not really very helpful, and that's not probably what the mentee's after. Ensure you've asked for an agenda, and I'm going to talk about, I say here a couple of days in advance of the meeting, I'm going to talk about a meeting, the first meeting and subsequent meetings. But one of the things that I always try and do is prompt, from a mentor position, I prompt the mentee to say, what do you want to talk about this week? I know we're meeting on Thursday, what do you want to talk about? And the other thing is, of course, that we may be the expert as the mentor, but we don't know everything. I certainly don't know everything. I'm learning. If you see some of the work I'm working on at the moment, you'll see that I'm learning by the hour, because some of it's really by the skin of the teeth. I'm working, for those of you who don't know, I'm working in the field of cybercrime, and it's a changing platform. Wake up every morning and read something else that happens, some other clever guy had another clever idea, and how are we going to respond to it? So I'm learning the whole time, and I think I've never actually learned more than I have in the last 4.5 years doing what I'm doing now. It's I'm not quite sure whether my brain can take all of that's being thrown at it, but it's good fun trying. So from a mentee's perspective, do you listen or do you talk? Yes, you're going to have to listen, especially if you've asked for something that the experienced person is going to give you. But don't be scared to challenge that, to ask more questions. Don't ever allow yourself to walk away from a meeting having been told something and not really understanding it. Be bold enough and big enough to say, I love the fact that you're telling me about X, but you're going to have to really explain it because I really don't. And that's important to be able to say that. So tell me how it works. Tell me how I can physically do that to make it work. I know you've told me that I need to change the engine in my car, but how do I do it? And the answer may be you may have to do a bit of listening because the answer may be longer than you expect. Understand also that your mentor doesn't know everything, but they will know a man or a woman that does. So they may say to you, I have not got an idea, but I'm going to come back to you on that one. And then it's down to you, the mentor, to actually fulfill that promise. If you make a promise to find something out, fulfill it. Make sure it's the first thing you come back with at the next meeting. I left you at the last meeting by saying I was going to find out about X. Here's the answer. How are you going to use it? Really important. So the first meeting, this is probably, now the first meeting is not the meeting. I know that Sam, and you might want to comment if you want to in the middle of this, Sam. You know, that first meeting where Sam gets on the phone with me, the mentor, and the mentee, introduces you both, and then says, get on with it. And then after about 20 minutes of talk backwards and forwards, she'll then turn off and disappear completely, and then you're on your own. That is not your first meeting. That is the introduction meeting. So that's sort of the meeting before the first meeting. So the first meeting is the first time that you actually get together proper on your own. And the things that I'm going to suggest you do if you're taking on a mentee is as follows. If the mentee has filled out a questionnaire, which they will do for the eLearning Network's mentoring scheme, go back and read it again. You've probably read it once. You probably read it again before you had that initial conversation, and then you may have a few weeks before you actually meet again. Go read it again. Really try and understand who the person is that you're going to be talking to. I often go and look them up online. I go and do a search, find out, go and have a look if they've got a LinkedIn account, go and see if I can find them on Twitter somewhere. Go and have a look and see if I can find out a little bit about who they are. Just so that I know from a perspective of who am I dealing with. And think about how you may use what you found. And I'd be very honest with the mentee and say, hey, I looked you up on LinkedIn, so I know a little bit about you, but tell me more about X. I'm interested. Might be a good way to start off. In that first meeting, listen, listen, listen. Now, when I say listen, don't just hear. Listen, take it in. What you're going to find out in that first half an hour of the first meeting is really what the objective is. Why are we here? What is it this mentee really needs? And actually you have to then start to say to yourself, how can I actually fill that role? But really understand what they're asking for in a relationship. And if you don't get that, challenge, ask questions so that you really do understand what they want from the relationship. And at that time, you can set the objectives for the rest of the meetings, being aware the goalposts may change and you may not get there. One of the mentees that I've got at the moment, who actually is on the call, I asked for a list of what is it you've got, what is it you want to do, and the response I got back was, well, here's my plan. Here's my plan, and here's the 5 things I want to cover. I mean, brilliant. That doesn't always happen. Another who's on the call today, we started off in one place and we ended up something completely different, but okay, that's fine. They are quite happy. They should decide the direction. Understand the expectations. Be very clear. Be very clear with the mentee and get the mentee to be very clear to you about what your expectations are and what their expectations are. And don't forget, before you all go away the first meeting, set a date for the second meeting, something to work to. Now, you may say, look, we're going to meet sometime in 2 months' time, and I'm going to ping you an email in 6 weeks to say, right, are you ready to meet? When do you want to meet? But that's the aim where we are. Liam, I'll answer your question. You said you're surprised to hear about looking someone up on Twitter, etc., before a meeting. I will tell you in that very first meeting that I'm going to go and in that very introduction meeting, I'll tell you I'm going to go and see if you've got a Twitter. I'll actually ask you, have you got a Twitter account? Can I go and have a look at it? Are you on LinkedIn? I'm going to go and have a look at it, if that's all right. Now, it may be, if you feel uncomfortable at that stage with me as the mentor looking you up, then actually we're probably not right for each other, because I'd like to know a lot about you. I'd like to know what makes you tick and what you do and what you've been and what you've done, because when we talk about the objectives where you're going, you really need to be in the same place. I hope that's answered that question. I certainly wouldn't do it. I wouldn't go out and go searching for you and sort of under the wire. I'd make it very open and very clear that that's exactly what I'm going to be doing. And I'd hope you go and have a look. To be honest with you, you're going to be my mentee. I'd hope you go look me up, find out a little bit who I am. Who is this person I'm going to be telling all this stuff to? What sort of experience do they have? So it works from both sides. Come to the meeting prepared from a mentee's perspective. You're going to be telling a lot about yourself, so be prepared in that first meeting to do a bit of talking. Do come with an agenda, and be very clear, as I said, about your expectations. And I think that if you're more open you are with each other, the better experience you will have at the end of the day. So you move forwards. Subsequent meetings. As I say, I would always email 3 days before the meeting. I'll simply how things are. Have you been able to complete the tasks? If not, do you need any help? Do you need some more time? I will ask, what do you want to cover in your next meeting? Have you got an agenda for it? I'll make sure I've confirmed the day and time and how we're going to communicate, because sometimes it may not work that I'm going to be able to get onto Skype, but I am going to be around the corner somewhere. So let's meet in a coffee shop and have a face-to-face. I'm going to be at the, at Learning Technology. Say if it's in January, well, it'd be great to sit and meet, have a cup of coffee there and a conversation. Plan your meeting. What are you going to try and cover? Check on the progress from last time. Look at both successes and failures and try and work out how things could have gone better. What is the next step? So be really prepared. Come to the table knowing what you're going to try and achieve. From the mentee's perspective, give a progress report. I.e., we talked about doing X. I've done the following. It's really good to be able to sort of speak about what you've done so that you can actually put it on the table. You may want to reassess your overall objectives. We started off talking about X and I've done Y, and actually I want to change this whole thing because I actually realize I've got something really much better I can be doing. Somebody on the call who's listening has been in exactly that position. Don't forget that, this is your time. So if there's questions that need to be answered, answer them. Talk about what went well. Talk about what didn't go well. How can you make the meeting better? So if something wasn't quite how you wanted it last time, be vocal and say, I really didn't like the way we did X, Y, Z last time. Do you think we could do it a different way? Make sure the relationship stays on an even keel and an even balance. And then we move towards this final meeting. And this is quite important. The final meeting, often when so I get into my 5th hour, I'm quite happy to do a final closure meeting as a separate meeting. Not all mentors will want to do that. So if you're a mentor that actually you're on your 5th meeting and you're happy this is the last meeting, you've got to leave maybe the last 20 minutes of that final meeting to make sure that you get to closure. The final meeting is important from a mentee's perspective, that they're not going to probably talk to you again unless they need something. And Liam, I see you've answered a question. I'll come back to it in a second. And once they've gone away from sort of being mentored, they may feel really sort of uncomfortable to maybe come bang on your door again. So you've got to actually make a decision. Do you want them to leave the door open? I do. I always say to my mentees, now, anytime, don't worry, ping me an email. I'll always answer you. I can always pick the phone up. We can always have a chat. So leave enough time. Don't shorten that last few minutes of the meeting. Don't leave it to the last 5 minutes. Say right now it's the last meeting. Let's sort of talk about the end. So leave a good sort of 15 or 20 minutes at the end to talk about what you've covered, where you've been, how the progression was. Try and get a two-way conversation around how the mentee has felt about it, how they feel it's improved what they're doing. Was there anything they maybe didn't get that they might have wanted? Give feedback and ask for feedback. It's a two-way feedback. Ask them what went well, what didn't go well, what could I have done better? How could we have done this differently if we did it again? Did it suit your purpose? Did we actually get to where you wanted to get to? So discuss the learning and what are you going to do with this now? So what are your next things to do? I see there's questions and answers. Did somebody answer a last question? I'm going to have a quick read. Give me a second to have a read.
Neil, it's John here. I did ping an answer to Liam to say that we'll work through the remainder of this kind of formal bit and then we'll deal more with the questions.
Yeah, great. I'll do that and come back to those and have a read. What a good idea. Anybody else got a question, put it into the Q&A and we'll come back to it with the greatest of pleasure. So once we get to the end of the final meeting, there's actually a bit of loss that goes on, and I never really expected it to happen from a mentor's perspective. I first found it when I was working at the UTC, at the University Technology College, where I'd said goodbye to this 18-year-old kid who I'd been working with over a period of 6 months, who had no idea what they wanted to do with their life. and by the time I left was actually already had managed to sign himself into up into a BTEC, and was actually making plans about getting letters to go out and try actually looking for a job. And I came away feeling really good about what I'd managed to achieve. But there was this sort of void. I have no idea whatever happened to them. Did they ever make it? And that's something that you have to learn to cope with. Really sorry to say. It's not appropriate for me to go banging back on their door now and saying, well, how did you do? Did you manage to get a job? Because you may have been unemployed for 6 years, and that'd be an awful place to be. But and in fact, the rules from the UTC is that once it's finished, you don't have any further contact with them. So it's that's something you just need to be aware of. That at the end, there is a bit of a void, there is a bit of a loss, and to just be aware that is actually going to happen. Now, I need to cover what could go wrong. And I think it's really important to cover what could go wrong. There is always an opportunity where something's going to happen and there'll be a conflict. If you're working with the eLN, thankfully, we've got Sam. We can always say, hey, Sam, we need you to come and intervene here. And I think it's knowing when to intervene. If there's a safety concern, somebody has said something to you that actually has thrown up a really big red flag that you feel uncomfortable with, then actually you do need to decide when is the right time to take that back and tell somebody about it. Now, if you're working from the eLN perspective, yes, I would absolutely pick the phone up to Sam and say, hey, Sam, what do you think of this? I need to tell you something. And a decision needs to be made once you're in that, because you're in the eLN scheme. A decision may have to be made that somebody from the eLN will make contact with the mentee and say, this has been told to us, and what would we feel we need to do something about it. If you have a concern at that level, please act earlier rather than too late. From the school's perspective, to give you an idea at the UTC, now we're dealing with youngsters here. We've been through a whole set of training courses around what to do in the event of, somebody walks in covered in bruises, somebody breaks down in the middle of the conversation about something that is very important to them, which you feel is a safety concern. Now, when you're dealing with youngsters, it's slightly different, but this is no different when working with somebody in industry who has maybe told you something in confidence, and you'll probably have to say to them, and you do need to say to them before you speak to Sam, I'm really concerned about what you've just told me. I really feel that this needs to be, I'm not the fact that I feel that something should be done about it, but I need to actually report this back to the eLN so the eLN are aware of it. How would you like me to deal with it? And try and have the conversation. Not an easy one to have, but something that's there that can, just be aware something can go wrong. From a mentee's perspective, what can go wrong is much different. It's, I don't like the way this feels. Not sure I should have said what I just said. I can't really take it back, but maybe then I just say, I'm really not sure I should have said that to you. I'm not really sure I should have told you that. But then from a mentor's perspective, it's actually reassuring with the fact that this is a confidential conversation and they shouldn't be worried the fact that they've told you it's not going any further. If you're not sure about your mentor, well, that's not difficult to change. That's really easy. You may feel conflicted if you're a mentee more than once, but if you're not comfortable with the way you feel conflicted, then actually you have to say something. And if you're in if you are a mentee in the scheme and you don't feel comfortable about saying it to your mentor, then pick the phone up to Sam and say it to Sam. So that's the person to reach out to from the eLN. What I've covered in the last 45 minutes is sort of the whole scheme of being a mentor. And as you can see, that a lot of it is very fluid. as I said, in what I call it, in the moment. A lot of it is really being able to share your experiences, introduce people to other people in your network, maybe. I actually last year was mentoring a teacher at a school, and what we actually ended up doing was spending a day and we went to Bet and walked around the Bet exhibition, so that I could give the experience of having been at this one of these shows and what you see and what you're trying to be sold, which really suited the conversation that I was having at the time about the fact that they didn't know what they should be introducing technology-wise into a school. And it was easier to say, okay, come, let's go to an exhibition together. In the same way as you're the mentor, you might want to take somebody or meet up with somebody at somewhere like Learning Technologies and introduce them to half a dozen people. Somebody who's maybe starting out on their own for the first time and you happen to be working with them, yeah, great, meet up at Learning Technologies and introduce them to half a dozen people as you're walking around the place. Try to help them grow their network rather than saying, here's a few email addresses, just go and sort of email them. So again, the whole thing is very fluid. I came to a point where I knew that what I wanted to do when I got to the last sort of 10 or 15 minutes was to talk about any questions that come up. And thankfully, I'm right on the right point of time. It's quite rare for me to sort of end up at the right place at the right time. I suggested a couple of questions. Is this someone you can talk to privately to find out more? Sam's girl.
Thanks, Neil.
What's your Twitter address?
Yatesy_girl.
There you go. See, Sam's your girl.
Or you can contact me through the eLN as well. There's a mentoring email address on the website.
If you've got a team and you want to can you all get involved? Yes, you can. Absolutely. And I'm going to throw open and say, what did I not hear today but need to know? And I thought what I do there is maybe we need to go back through these questions and have a look what are in them. The first one got answered, which is what's the difference between a coach or a mentor? Hopefully I've answered Liam with regards to the looking people up online. And I see you've come back and said it's understandable you want to know more about them, but I think it's very important that they have control over what they share with you. Absolutely. Now, before I read any further there, if you're going to put something onto LinkedIn, a LinkedIn profile, basically you're putting that out in the public. So you have control over what you're sharing with me there by the mere fact you've put it onto LinkedIn, because you're telling the world. When I say go and look something up about people, I don't mean go and try and find out a little bit round the back door that you don't know. No, absolutely, that would be completely inappropriate. I think what I'm talking about is going and looking at their public profile. If they happen to be tweeting every day, go and see the type of thing they're tweeting about. They're doing it publicly, so there's no reason why you shouldn't have seen. Go and follow them. And have a look at the type of tweets they're putting out. Do they fit with the sort of thing where you can help them? And I think that's where it is. You say you think it's quite ethical, and you'd be quite shocked if you told me you didn't want to work with me because I didn't want you checking out my Twitter profile. Well, if you're on Twitter, it's very hard. I don't think it's possible for me not to see your tweets if I want to. I mean, it's public. I can see everything.
People, Neil.
Yeah, you're absolutely. Well, yeah, you could block me. But I think that if you were in a position that you felt you had to block me as your mentor from looking at what you were putting out on Twitter, then we're not right for each other.
No.
To be very honest with you, I don't think it goes any further than that. If you don't want me to see the tweets you're tweeting, and you're going to block me from that, then really we shouldn't be working together as a mentor and mentee. Unless, of course, you're tweeting about me and you don't want me to see it.
Liam, do you want to come back on that by me giving you a voice, so to speak? If you do, just put your hand up or let me know. Rachel had a question about the profile of your mentor, which Sam has answered. Thank you, Sam. I don't know whether you want to just recap that.
Yes, I will. That's actually quite a good question, Rachel. Thanks. So, if you want to ask for a specific type of mentor or someone with a particular profile, this happens all the time with the eLN scheme, and I think it's something that we welcome, because obviously it shows that you know what kind of advice and help that you're looking for. So that generally helps us to get a good match for you. If we can't find someone with that particular profile, if you're being quite specific in what you're looking for, we'll always try and find the closest match that we can, and we'll discuss that with you, as to why your original request isn't possible, and we'll make sure that you are happy with who we do find for you. And it's part of that introductory meeting that I set up at the beginning, is to make sure that you have a chance to chat to each other before your official sessions start, just to make sure that it feels like this could be a match. And obviously I will check in throughout the relationship as well to make sure that that is still working, and if it's not, then yes, we can discuss finding someone who is more appropriate for what you need.
Okay, now with those
to...
questions answered, I sort of wanted really to throw it back to you guys, because I know you want to talk about what's coming up next year, with sort of 5 minutes to go.
Yeah, Liam did put his hand up, but I don't know where he's gone now. I can't find him. So anyway, maybe he'll put his hand back up if he wants to. Oh no, hang on, I'm looking at the wrong list.
Can't see him in the list now.
Hi, Liam.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello.
Yes, we can now. Apologies for the delay.
That's okay. It kind of kicked me out and brought me back in. Yeah, thanks for that. I think that there's quite a strong distinction between doing background research. My position on this, and I think that the position from a sort of one-to-one supportive perspective, and also from a kind of, if you're looking at it from a sociological perspective as well, is that it's really important for the individual to have control of the narrative. And if you go out and you look at what people do on Twitter or their kind of public profile, you're kind of taking it out of context. And in a one-to-one helping relationship, it's really important that the individual has control of that narrative. So if you ask them if that's okay for them to go and have a look and they say yes, then that's one thing. But I think it's a very different thing to come in with that as an expectation. And I would be quite, as I say, I would be quite shocked if you did that, and I think I would find that very problematic.
Okay.
Just to give you a bit of background, I am a qualified coach. I have a master's in coaching and mentoring, and I've researched around kind of interviewing and narrative and that sort of thing. So this is not a sort of knee-jerk response. I think it's the same. For me, it's the same thing that kind of arises with job applications and that kind of thing. When you invite somebody to send in a CV and an application form, but you don't ask them if you can look at their social media profile, Twitter, for example, there's something a little bit kind of, it takes control of the narrative from them. And I think that that's a really important piece of control that a mentee or a coachee or whoever has.
I think, Liam, I hear what you're saying, but I think maybe you've taken this slightly out of context. One of the things I did say, and I put the slide back on the screen now, was I said, research the mentee, look them up online. What did you find? How will you use it? And I think that that's the important part in there, was when I said, how will you use it? I don't think that I want to go scuttling around in the background trying to find out all I can about you before I get you on the phone and talk to you. I think what I want to see is I want to see who you are and what you do. I want to see, are you actually a gas fitter that wants to be mentoring you because you want to become an e-learning designer? So, or have you been creating e-learning already for the last 3 or 4 years for 3 or 4 companies that I may or may not have known? And that I can see quite happily on your public LinkedIn profile. If you weren't happy for anybody to see that on your LinkedIn profile, you wouldn't have put it there in the first place. And I don't think I would do it covertly. I think I would be quite happy to say this to you in your, in fact, I have said it to all of my mentees in the first introductory meeting. I'm going to go look up, see who you are now. Is that all right? You know, if we're going to work together, I think there's got to be a trust bond that goes both ways. I would expect you to go and find out a little bit about me, and I'd say that as well. I don't think you're taking the narrative away from them at all, because I don't think me knowing anything about you has anything to do with what you're bringing to the table and we're going to be talking about.
I think I would fundamentally disagree with that. I think
Okay.
I would fundamentally disagree with that. I think that all the things that you're talking about, you could do as part of, and are typically done as part of, an intake process. And part of the trust building is about building the relationship with the individual and asking them to let you know what they want to tell you about themselves and about those things. If you have questions about them, then
what you're describing is a much more formal approach rather than the informal approach that I'm suggesting that you should be using.
Maybe we need to take this into another
absolutely. I'm most happy to do so.
Okay. Good point. Thanks, Liam. I'm going to mute you again now. We're nearing the end of the session. We just have a few minutes left. And first of all, I know one or two people are having to leave already, but I want to thank Neil and of course Sam and everybody for contributing. Just to quickly round off, as Neil said, we do have, I'm already beginning to schedule new webinars for next year, and I'm delighted to say that I already pretty much know what the first three or who the first three will be by. So first one I'm still waiting, but Virtual College did win 2 gold awards at Wednesday's Learning Technologies event. Filtered will probably be talking about content curation, and John Curran is going to be talking about LMSs and such like. So we'll put all the information up on the website once we have the dates and the registration links. And I know a lot of you are repeat attendees, so thank you for that. Is there anything else on the next slide, Neil?
No, not at all. I think you just said thank you at the end.
Okay. I think we've had another question from Amina, she's asking how long a session takes. Mine are normally about an hour. Are yours?
Yeah, I absolutely aim for an hour. I'm going to be very honest with you. Sometimes I may go 10 minutes over, but normally if we're coming up towards the end of the hour, I know that there's something that I've got to shut down at the end of the hour, 5 minutes or so before. I'll be very clear. Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left. So, is there anything we haven't covered today?
And it really keeps you focused, doesn't it? Because you don't want it to waffle on and whatever. Okay. Well, we've had a comment from Kim about social media posts being very public. I've done an evaluation poll with the people who are still in the session, and that's very positive. So thank you very much, everybody. I think, unless there's anything you wanted to add, Neil or Sam?
No, not at all. Really very happy. I hope you've all had a good time. I can see some of you have, most of you have. So anything I haven't covered, you can always email me. Let me put my email back on for the last 30 seconds. If I can find the cursor in the right place.
I'd just like to add on the end as well, thank you, Neil. That was really, really useful, and I think particularly for new people joining the eLN scheme as well, who have not been exposed to mentoring before, that would have been really useful.
And there's my LinkedIn profile, go look me up.
Well, yes, go and look him up and find him on Twitter. And yes, and please do get in touch if you have any more questions on the scheme.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks very much, all.
Thanks, everybody.
Hope you enjoyed your lunch hour.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye all.